All right, so folks are starting to filter in. We're just going to let people have a couple minutes to hop on, and we'll get going at 5:05 MIT time. All right, everyone, I'm just going to get going with the introduction. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We like to start off our events by reading the land acknowledgement. The MIT Indigenous Peoples Advocacy Committee, in partnership with MIT's American Indian Science and Engineering Society, and also the Native American Student Association and other Indigenous MIT students and alumni work together to develop this land acknowledgement statement with the ICEO. So MIT acknowledges Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of the land and the enduring relationship that exists between them and their traditional territories. The land on which we sit is the traditional unceded territory of the Wampanoag Nation. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced occupation of their territory, and we honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous people connected to this land on which we gather from time immemorial. So I know not everyone is necessarily on MIT land right now, so I'll put in the chat the link if you're interested to look up your area. So closed captionings are available for this event. You can put in the chat if you're having any trouble accessing them. You can put that in the chat, but there should be a bar at the top of the screen where you can just click to enable them. At the end of the talk, we will be holding a audience Q&A portion, and you'll see at the bottom of your screen next to raise hand and live transcript, there is a Q&A box, and we ask that you add your questions to the Q&A so that we can track them there, and folks can upvote questions. If there's a question that you also want to hear the answer to, you can upvote it there. And we ask that you don't use the chat for the Q&A just because that's harder to track. You're welcome to use the chat if you have a comment, but for questions, please put them in the Q&A. I'm going to put some links in the chat to follow WGS on social media if you don't already. And I'm going to hand it over to Lerna for introductions.
Hi. Welcome to our second McMillan Stewart talk of this term. We are very lucky to have Dr. Nilofar Sakhi with us, who will be delivering a talk in the next 45 minutes, after which we will be opening up the floor for questions. Let me first quickly introduce Nilofar. Dr. Sakhi is a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. She's a scholar and policy practitioner who has written extensively on various aspects of transitional security and human security, peacemaking and peace-building processes. Her recent book is on human security and agency, reframing productive power in Afghanistan. Sakhi has been involved in assisting peace, counterinsurgency, and gender policy formation. Her thematic expertise is terrorism, security, and peace. Her regional expertise is on South Asia, Iran, and Afghanistan, with focus on regional security architecture. Sakhi has been involved in developing strategies and programs for women in politics and economy in Afghanistan. She's the founder of the first women civil society organization and the first radio station for women in the western zone of Afghanistan. Dr. Sakhi has been involved in Afghanistan peace processes since 2010 and remains a regular commentator in media and writer on analyzing the challenges and prospects of peace processes. She was formerly a visiting fellow at the National Endowment for Democracy, Columbia University, and a fellow at Asia Society and International Center for Tolerance Education. Sakhi holds a PhD degree in International Conflict Analysis and Resolution from George Mason University and a master's degree in International Public Policy from Johns Hopkins University and another master's degree in Conflict Transformation and Peace Building from Eastern Mennonite University. Thank you so much, Dr. Sakhi, for being with us today. I wish we were convening under different circumstances. We really appreciate your time and commitment to the region, to the topic, and sharing your expertise with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lorena, for a very kind and generous introduction. Thank you, MIT and Women in Gender Studies program for inviting me here. It's an honor to be among all of you. And good morning, by the way, good afternoon and good evening for, depending on from where you're joining us. I assume most of you are in the United States, so it means good evening for all of us. There's a lot to talk and a lot to discuss about the topic that I'm assigned to discuss today, which is traditional and non-traditional security issues and its regional implications. There has been, Afghanistan has had this traditional and non-traditional security issues from many decades, but I will gonna my today's highlights and focus would be really on the current traditional and non-traditional security issues in light of the current changes and current circumstances and current context. So I try to just limit my discussion around there's new changes in Afghanistan and what it means for Afghanistan itself and for the region, and at some point for the world going forward, and what kind of traditional and non-traditional security issues could emerge from the current situation, which has recently launched in Afghanistan. Just to frame a little bit my discussion around traditional and non-traditional, current traditional and non-traditional security issues, I would like to give a little bit of context. Not really an in-depth historical analysis at this point. I have only 45 minutes to finish my talk, but a little bit of context from last 20 years of that could frame my discussion well. So in 2001, the whole story starts after. The story starts before 9/11 in Afghanistan, but I would like to focus since then what changes happened and what brought us here where we are, and how these issues, the traditional and non-traditional security issues, have relevance to those events in the past. So after 9/11, the United States entered in Afghanistan, intervened in Afghanistan, let's put it that way, with a mission and vision to fight terrorism, to combat terrorism. So the goal was anti-terrorism efforts, to achieve anti-terrorism and reach anti-terrorism efforts, and also combat terrorism. Though there were different kind of analysis from that point, that there was another mission at that point of building a state in Afghanistan, building a nation in Afghanistan. There are all kinds of literature and reports that highlights what was exactly the mission. But overall, the overarching goal of the United States intervention was to combat terrorism. So the United States entered with all the, when the United States forces entered in Afghanistan, it means it attracted the international community, and of course the United States allies, NATO forces, they all intervened in Afghanistan with a very comprehensive program of fighting terrorism. Meanwhile, with that, there were a number of other initiatives and programs that focused on building a state, though the mission was never highlighted as a state building, but there were activities were kind of around that area where institutions were developed in Afghanistan. The Constitution of Afghanistan was formed, the new constitution was formed and developed, and the state structure, infrastructure that was put in place, the process for democratization, which election was an important element of it. A lot of efforts and money was allocated to that particular sector. People's participation, and name it, civic education, number of development, other programs that development agencies, the UN, the World Bank has brought to Afghanistan in order to rebuild the country. And it was named Reconstruction Time, by the way, if not really state building, but reconstruction was a major program that all these entities that I named, they have part of their agenda. So with 20 years time frame, U.S. presence, U.S. NATO allies presence in Afghanistan, a lot has been achieved. Though there are lots of criticism on the nature of involvement. There are lots of facts that highlights that the involvement, both in shape of financial engagement and also building the capacity and human resource and the organizational resource in Afghanistan was not really fully explode in Afghanistan, and lots of money was only allocated to build the 5 major parts of the country, which was one province in the north, south, east, and west, but did not capture the entire country. So according to the report, it says that 74.5% of Afghan population, they live in the rural areas. So most of those development projects, or most of those nation building initiatives, they were unable to reach to those 74.5% of the population. Therefore, I mean, now that a lot of people are experts are talking about the collapse of the republic and the collapse of the democratic system, they are kind of raising finger on those development funding, on those kind of intervention where they were unable to reach to those 74.45% of the population who were living in the rural areas. So, and aside from all the development projects and programs that I highlighted, there were 3 areas that has gained and achieved a lot: the freedom of expression, civil rights, and women's rights in particular. There were a lot of attention and a lot of funding, support, strategy around building and empowering women, overall, an environment for women to grow and build their agencies. So women's rights were institutionalized. The women there were allocation of political positions for women. There was a quota system in the parliament for women. The education system, women inclusion in politics, women participation in the higher education. So in every sector, women in economy, women in politics. So in all these sectors, there were a high number of programs to further develop women rights and further develop women agency of power to step into this area and grow in the particular sector that I mentioned. So overall, and on the other hand, freedom of expression was also another area which has gained a lot of attention in the last 20 years, and a lot of efforts were also placed on it to build a free media in Afghanistan. So with that said, there were all those gains that I mentioned, keeping them aside, there were a number of challenges too in last 20 years, if you highlight those. One of the major challenges was that leadership, Afghanistan leadership, political leadership were so fragmented, and there were ethnic tensions within political institutions that actually impeded the political development in Afghanistan. There were also a lot of issues around power, formation of power. that also impeded the process of political development. And then corruption was another major issue and factor within the institution, within the government institution in Afghanistan, and overall within the development institutions also in Afghanistan, that impeded the process of social development, economic development in Afghanistan. So there were a number of the cases and reports and facts that highlight those challenges around the corruption, around abuse of power, around the fragmentation within the political elite and political leaders that impeded the process of state building, impeded a process where could allow political people's participation in political processes, and also undermined those all challenges, undermined actually the legitimacy of the Afghan government nationally. So there were Afghan government were having only control in those 5 major cities that I mentioned. Beyond those 5 major cities, as in the rural areas, the remote areas, they did not have control, and there were a traditional system in place, traditional governance system in place, where people were relying on those governance system rather than the central governance system. So all those challenges handed together, and they were one of the major causes of the collapse. Now, about another major factor that added again to the collapse of the republic, which I'm going to discuss as also at some point, is the lack of attention or lack of seriousness on the growing nature or growing power of the Taliban at that point. From 2003, when United States got involved in Iraq, Taliban had expanded their control in rural areas of Afghanistan. They started their shadow kind of a governance system in place, informal governance system in place, where in order to buy the hearts and minds of the people, and also to expand their outreach and have strongholds in many of the remote areas of Afghanistan. So therefore, a government couldn't have its reach beyond those 5 major cities that I mentioned throughout the last 20 years. And Taliban gradually, they had their alliances within tribal areas of those areas. They had their strongholds and expanded their outreach and had gained more control. That was one of the reasons of the collapse. So that is the background. The last 20 years, a very brief and very highlighted kind of a snapshot that I provided. And there are lots of dynamics, facts, and elements that are attached to the last 20 years of achievements, gains. Meanwhile, the challenges and the factors that were the causes of the collapse. So from 2009 onwards, there were talks here in the United States among the policy sectors here and politicians to end the war in Afghanistan and to withdraw forces. There were a couple of deadlines, by the way, during the different administrations in the United States about ending war in Afghanistan, and then bringing all parties together and creating a settlement, building a settlement, and then withdraw the troops. They were naming this process as the peace process. So one of the peace processes was started in 2010, with nothing really, no substantive gains from that process, because there was lack of political will for the parties like Taliban and the Afghan government to sit at the table of negotiation. Overall, there were also some other political factors that was that impeded the process to happen. So that was one thing which happened. It was a program and then never ended substantially anywhere. The other, though some experts highlight that the establishment of the Taliban political office for the Taliban in Qatar was one of the outcomes of that particular peace process of 2010. One of the analysis about that peace process's outcome is around that Qatar office for the Taliban. And everything has changed in the recent peace, again, another peace process from last 20 years that we name it. And that started in 2018, October of 2018, where the United States started leading that particular peace process for sure. And then the first phase of the process was to convene negotiations with the Taliban. Taliban is who were in direct armed conflict with the United States, and to come to a solution and to end the wars. Some call that as a peace process, by the way, some experts and analysts, but often it is some are referring to that as a withdrawal process. It was a withdrawal. Hello?
We can hear you. Oh, what happened?
I think we lost her, but hold on, let me see. No, she's still there. She still looks like a participant. Hold on one second.
Oh.
There you are. Oh, you're muted.
Hello?
Okay, you're here. Yes, perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I don't know what happened.
It's okay. Sorry it interrupted you though.
No, that's, yeah. Where was I?
Just get back on track.
I was talking about the peace process, yes. So the first phase of the process was the negotiations between the Taliban and the United States, and to come to a negotiation for the an agreement for the withdrawal, and then an agreement was made in Doha between the Taliban and the United States on February 29, 2020. And there were 4 elements attached to that particular agreement, but overall, in a nutshell, that was a kind of a withdrawal agreement that generated from that entire process of 9 rounds of negotiation between the Taliban and the United States. The second phase of that process was an intra-Afghan talks, which was meant to bring the Afghan Republic plus the Taliban together at the table of negotiation in Doha to develop a political settlement and end the war between themselves, and then build a solution or make a solution to run the country. So that was the second phase had a number of events, by the way, attached and associated with it. Especially there were rounds of negotiations between the Republic and the Taliban, which, from my analysis, what I have written a lot about each step and each phase of those negotiations. What I analyzed that there hasn't been a serious kind of negotiation between the two parties, which was Republic and the Taliban, and they never reached to a political settlement discussion and agenda even. The discussion agenda was all around logistics and showing and demonstrating power each side, but there was never a substantive discussion on the agenda of a political settlement, which was negotiation was meant to be around that particular area. So overall, and the third phase of that process was the regional component, which I'm going to discuss also to that, because Afghanistan war has never been purely a civil war, always in the past. And during the history, I mean, if we just read the history, we see that all these neighboring countries, regional countries, specifically neighboring countries, they had a stake both at in the peace and conflict of Afghanistan. Therefore, they were always there. They always intervened in either through proxies or directly supporting the country or creating or through diplomatic means. But they were always there. They were always involved in the political scenes, and they were in the political scenes of Afghanistan. So they were there. Therefore, there was a regional component also associated in that peace process. And the regional component was very ad hoc meetings of the special envoy of the peace and reconciliation with the head of the states in the region and the neighboring countries of Afghanistan in order to create a consensus on peace in Afghanistan and discuss issues relevant to collective security. My analysis out of that particular phase of the regional component was it was very irregular meetings, ad hoc irregular meetings, and for peace consensus to happen among regional countries for a collective security, there should be always a platform, a multilateralism process where it could involve a very organized, let's put it in a simple way, table of negotiations, where all these countries at the same time talking about the interests of one another or interests of their own states and trying to address those interests and also offer to each other resources in order to both have their interest and also the interest of the countries in the region. And that process never happened, by the way. That there were conferences in Moscow. There was a conference in China and Beijing. There were a number of conferences, especially in the northern countries, northern neighbor countries of Afghanistan. There were a number of conferences, but it was never structured. Those meetings were never structured, and there was never a presence of all the regional countries and neighboring countries at the same table to discuss the real interests. Talking from the real politic perspective, every state has their own interest, and they were not offering resources or kindness without, emphasizing on their own interests. And those interests were never shared at one table, and the clarity was not there. Therefore, that process of regional consensus building, from my perspective at least, never happened for the Afghan peace process. So all these processes, which was started from 2018, they were events. They were events which finally did not succeed with the Taliban escalation of violence, capturing of more districts within 4 to 5 weeks, and then within 3 weeks they capture the major cities. And finally, in August, mid-August, early August, they captured the big cities, and the mid-August, they entered Kabul, and the president of Afghanistan, Ashraf Ghani, he escaped with his team, and there was a vacuum of power, and Taliban took over Kabul and Afghanistan overall. So that's a context. That's a frame that I wanted to provide in order to discuss the traditional and non-traditional security issues that Afghanistan face. So that is actually the context that created a new set of traditional and non-traditional security issues. Before delving into traditional and non-traditional security issues that Afghanistan have facing today, let me explain the nature of traditional and non-traditional security threats first. So any threat which is against the essential value of a state and political sovereignty, against political sovereignty of a state, and any threat which is against the territorial sovereignty of a state, those are traditional security issues. And the means that actually define the traditional security are military, armament systems, and also diplomatic means such as pacts, agreements, security alliances. They are all means to foster a relationship between the states, and also they are means of traditional to ensure traditional security. And the non-traditional security threats are often the challenges to the survival and well-being of people and states. And in other words, it's they are the challenge to survival and well-being of the national security of the state that arise primarily out of non-military sources. For example, cross-border issues, drug trafficking, resource scarcity, infectious diseases, climate change. So they are all coming under the non-traditional security issues. So when I talk about the traditional and non-traditional security issues of Afghanistan, I'm going to refer to all of these issues which Afghanistan right now has, and it might even expand. The level of these threats might expand going forward. Why? I'm going to discuss it within the next few minutes. So with the Taliban in power now, Taliban is a militant group who are known in the literature of insurgency and terrorism as a terrorist groups in some of the literature. But they are the militant group, and they still have ties with the transnational terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda that pose serious threats to its own security and security of the region. So though there are literature and reports now, at least since Taliban took over, that Taliban have changed and it's Taliban 2.0, because Taliban has a history of governance in Afghanistan from 1996 to 2001. So experts try to compare Taliban of those time with the Taliban of this time, and then they put different analysis forward that, well, based on this action and reaction, they have changed a bit. So they might be develop a different policies for every sector that they are part of it now. So, but overall, you can read from news, from media, and from different experts and analysis, different perceptions about this 2.0 Taliban. But what exactly in practice is happening right now in Afghanistan since they took over? First of all, they formed an interim government. The interim government with the hardliners, with the hardcore. And hardcore of Taliban means that the people who were, some of them were from Haqqani network, some of the leading members of the group right now in the interim government, they are from Haqqani network, and they are the hardcore. And they are some of them are from Salafist ideology. And Salafist ideology is the extremist version of the interpretation of the Islamic ideology that these groups have. So some of them, the hardcore means that some of those members are from Salafist ideology. The leading members are from Haqqani, and Haqqani are they were considered among the insurgent terrorist groups. And there are also, and of course, the composition doesn't have any other ethnic groups. There are only two members who one of them is Uzbek, another is Tajik, which are the ethnic groups of Afghanistan. There are two members from two different ethnic groups, but the entire team, they are Pashtun ethnic group, and Pashtun are it's led by the Pashtun ethnic group, which many of the Taliban belong to the same ethnic group. So, and then on the other hand, there is no women involved in the interim government of the Taliban, the newly established interim government of Taliban. So no women or highliners, all hardlines or hardcore members of the Taliban, plus members of the Haqqani network who are considered the brutal militant group. So they're all the composition actually is not hopeful. The composition is by itself create confusion and set a frame or set a line or guideline for the for whoever is analyzing to see that it could pose security threats to the country itself first. Why? Because one of the reasons, when people don't see themselves in the political sector and the political institution and they don't see their presence actually anywhere in the politics. What happens? I mean, we have seen literature across the different case studies around the world that it creates sense of it creates actually identity issues. That who am I when I am not involved in the politics of my own country? Who am I when I don't have the right to decide about the policies that are around my own life? Or and then who am I when I am not identified as an active a member of this particular society that I live? So this whole sense of identity crisis that this particular Interium setup could create, that is a security threat. How that could change into a security threat based on what we have seen from a number of case studies across the world, that when people don't see their presence in a political system, they don't see them part of a political system, they don't see their voices in the political system, they adopt two ways. They either resist against the system or leave the country. So by now what we are seeing, a mass exodus of the people from Afghanistan. People are trying their best to leave the country. Since mid-August, 15 August, when the Taliban took over, some of you might have read the report or see the news, what's happening, that any progressive member of the society in Afghanistan, he or she tries to leave the country and tries every means. I receive number of calls on daily basis from women from the universities, girls from schools, people who used to work in media and NGOs, ex-government officials who were in the very low administrative positions. They all are trying their ways to go out, and they just call us and call not only me, many of us who are here, just to find a way and to provide or any solution for them to just get out of the country, or if we know any place to introduce them in order to process a visa for them or evacuate them. So that's happening already. And that is not only in case of Afghanistan, across the world, we have seen that when people don't see themselves in the political processes, they don't see their voice, there's a sense of the identity crisis is starting within them, and that makes them either leave or resist. Now the resistance type, that's the leaving we're already seeing, and that's going to happen more, by the way, going forward when the Taliban have further strengthened their holds in Afghanistan. The second is resistance. People resist when they don't see their presence in the political system. The resistance is, what I see based on my analysis and studying politics, is that when they resist, they have two kinds of resistance. So one resistance is, well, it is a very non-violent movement that civil actors, civil society actors, or reformers, they start across the country. The other resistance is armed resistance, that's insurgency. And people have lots of revenge, and people want to have revenge. The grievances inside them, the grievances in their life promote some kind of an agency within them. And that agency is to sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. The positive is that they try to bring change. They have collective movements. They have a non-violent movement in order to topple the system or regime. And then they create their own a system to replace that. That's a positive way. The negative of it is that when they see that, well, a group like Taliban, who is still they are using violence as a means to govern the population. So when they see such a system in place, where the system itself uses violence as a tool to govern the population, then they take arms. And when they take arms, that is dangerous. When they take arms, it means that's a resistance movement, armed resistance movement that could create pockets of insurgencies across the country. And that pockets of insurgency were most of the analysts, and I also have written a lot about it from last 3 months, that Afghanistan, as I mentioned initially, I highlighted that these neighboring countries always had hands in the politics of Afghanistan. Why? Because of their own interests. So they could easily have can commission these insurgents, and there's pockets of resistance which has taken the shape of insurgency, and they be the proxy of the regional countries, because Afghanistan is a poor country, and if pockets of resistance emerge, they need resources, they need arms, and for that arms, they will certainly reach out to the neighboring countries to give them those arms and resources. And for that, the regional countries and the neighboring countries will get involved, and that will create a civil war in the country, with different countries in the region supporting that part of civil war. And Afghanistan already had a history in the past that kind of insurgency when it emerged. So that is the fear. That's a fear when you see the interim system of Afghanistan, the interim government of the Taliban. That what causes, how dangerous that could be if they will not have it inclusive, if they will not have it really, if they've not considered the majority of the voices of the majority in this particular government that they want to set up permanently. So that it could cause this all events that I highlighted here, and it could be a gradual process, by the way, or it could be a fast track process. It depends on how the dynamics will evolve inside the country. So that's one thing about this, and it is a traditional security threats. So the whole, but I would see that the composition, the nature, and the form of this interim government by itself could cause a traditional security threats in Afghanistan going forward. That's one element of it. The other major characteristics of the Taliban governance system, or Taliban, I don't want to call them policies, but at least behavior and attitude from last 3 months that could cause a traditional security threat, is the governance, the whole operation of the Taliban, the way they govern. So Taliban, as I mentioned, they are a militant group with a very extremely notorious background, governance background from 1996 to 2001. And so people have those memories still. And on the other hand, they don't have, they might be good in the battlefield, but they have never been good in running a country. So they lack capabilities, they lack human resource, they lack technicality of running a state or governing a country. So this, for all this to happen, they need a team, and this interim government system that I highlighted, they don't have skillful people also. They're all clerics, which are mullahs, religious clerics who are part of this interim government, without any skillful people or technical people who could run the state or run the institution. So that is, with that said, so they will face serious challenges, serious challenge going forward in terms of governing the population. And now we also see in terms of the schools, education system, health system, transportation, one of the very, very, I wouldn't say a very easy thing. The passport has been an issue, issuing passport, and all the other administrative organization. They will encounter serious issues going forward because of this lack of capability within their own staff, or not staff, but within their own group that they have put in place from last 3 months. So that is that will create further frustration within the population. That will also not allow the generation of income. People already, they have lost hope. They are unable to invest. They don't want to invest, and then at least I'm talking about more than 3 months now. I'm not sure how things will go forward, but at least based on last 3 months facts, that's how things could be analyzed going forward. And when people don't invest, when people don't have any participation in economic development, and when all these institutions are so fragile and almost in a collapsed mood, So you could imagine what would happen, that the country will not have its own money to generate food. And right now, even Afghanistan is facing a severe humanitarian crisis, as some of you might have heard from different channels and sources, that according to the World Bank, it was WFP report, that half the population is facing severe starvation, and then there are all kinds of health issues and number of other human security, health security, and food insecurity that are in the country right now. And that has been the impact of the last 3 months of this political system that Taliban has put in place. But on the other hand, there are also one fact about this humanitarian crisis that Afghanistan faces is that Afghanistan has been historically reliant on the outside sources and funding. On the according to SIGAR report, 75.5% of the Afghanistan bills has been paid or was paid for, at least in the last 20 years, if we just consider that time frame only, by the international funding. So it has been a dependent country, economically dependent country, and now with the shrink in funding, reduction in funding, and freezing of Afghan assets, and overall no trade is happening. So with all this other economic crisis that's happening because of the Taliban takeover, the country is facing a severe humanitarian crisis. And if it's not addressed soon, that would be a human catastrophe by many of the practitioners, development practitioners, and humanitarian practitioners that has been laid out. So these are another kind of a traditional thread that I mentioned. The third one is the regional one, the traditional security threat that this Taliban government could cause is that because of the Taliban ties with the different transnational terrorist groups, specifically Al-Qaeda, that would create another variant of terrorism in the region. It has already inspired jihadists to rally around their global mission to expand their territorial and ideological war. And according to my analysis and according to what we have seen from the last 3 months, the messages from these jihadist groups and other transnational terrorist groups in the region, I would see that Pakistan, Bangladesh, Tajikistan, they are the countries who first will be affected by the Taliban's victory. And Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, TTP, has already made an explicit threat to attack the West in the past. That group will be inspired by has already been inspired by the Afghan Taliban's victory, and seek to expand its area of influence inside Pakistan and across the region. Similarly, in Bangladesh, we are hearing messages from Jamaatul Mujahideen Bangladesh, JMP, it's an indigenous terrorist groups committed to establishing an Islamic State through violence, has long aimed to establish a Taliban-style government, according to the recent statement that they released. And the Tajikistan, as I brought an example, I did a number of research on those countries. There are countries like Tajikistan. There are some parts in Tajikistan which has a very weak governance system, and where state operations seem to have provoked already some violent incident in the past. So, as the report highlights, violent extremism and insurgency does exist in Tajikistan, and their causes rooted in the Tajik state-society relations that might increase the potential of violent Islamic extremism. So these are the areas, at least based on the Tajikistan, based on a weak state and vulnerability. And on the other hand, the other state like Pakistan and Bangladesh, which already there are groups, Islamist or jihadist group exist there, and they already plan to expand their reach and their influence in those countries and in the region. So that is Taliban takeover means an inspiration for jihadist group regionally, and that will create a kind of a competition among this jihadist group to gain more power and influence in the region. As we have, as you might have heard about, ISKP already got so active. ISIS, Islamic State Khorasan, who has already had a number of attacks in Afghanistan, in Jalabad, Kunar, and Kabul, and they already expanded their influence throughout the country in Afghanistan. They are against the Taliban. That's at least what is happening in the news, and they will fight with the Taliban to overthrow them or expand their influence. So there's a kind of the competition would be around this terrorist groups for more power and resources, which Taliban takeover already inspired some of them regionally. So that could cause a security issue for the region. India already showed concern about that. Iran has been so concerned about it. Russia has shown concern about the influence of the Islamic groups and radicalization from the northern countries' borders. Pakistan itself is concerned about that, though Pakistan is a supporter of the Taliban, has been the supporter of the Taliban. So all these countries in the region who are concerned about their own security are more concerned now with the Taliban takeover. Though they were not really in favor of the US long-term presence in the region, but they were kind of relaxed when US was in the region, because for them the presence of US was kind of a security guarantee for those countries. But now that the US has left the region, US withdrawal happened, those countries are more concerned about their own security because of these different terrorist networks, transnational terrorist networks that are getting inspired, getting active, and trying to constitute more power in the region that could certainly impact the countries of all these neighboring countries and the region broadly. For example, China has shown concern a lot. The major countries which has shown concern and tried from last 3 months to build relationship with Taliban to get security assurances from the Taliban was Russia, China, Iran, and now India has been more and more concerned because of the Pakistan relationship with the Taliban, and India wants to step in. India recently had a security conference in Delhi. So all these countries overall are so much concerned about their own security, and they're trying to find a way either to work with the Taliban, not recognizing them. They don't have I think at this point, none of these countries are willing to recognize the Taliban. But overall, they have been trying to work with the Taliban in different format, like providing humanitarian assistance to the country, and different events happened that Taliban and the leaders of this country were at the table in order to get security assurances from the Taliban that Afghanistan soil will not be used against their own security, and Islamic radicalization and other terrorist group will not be rooted in Afghanistan that could impact or influence their own security. So these are all about the traditional security issues that I mentioned that going forward would be a concern for the country, for the regional country, and for the global peace as well. The traditional, non-traditional security threats, as I mentioned, the civil liberties has highly impacted since the Taliban took over. Women's rights has been highly threatened since the Taliban took over. Taliban ideologies are not are actually impeding women's movement, impeding women from political participation, prohibiting them from their active role in society, from their active role in economy. So there's the ideology of the Taliban is women are confined to a particular social life, and beyond that, they don't have a space in society. So that's the overarching ideology of the Taliban, and whatever policy and plan to develop, that will evolve around that. So as I mentioned, they don't have any women in their interior setup or interior government. They had ban on, they had their own justification, but overall schools were closed for girls, and universities, they had so much restrictions for girls to attend universities. And media, they recently had a couple of statements that again put more restrictions on the women journalists. So, and they went to different civil society organizations, Taliban members, and they stopped women to work in the field. So they stopped all the field workers, women field workers, and just name it, anything that would ensure, any processes that would ensure women economic, political participation and development. Taliban are against of that, and they have very clear statements to oppose any kind of a movement or any kind of activities or initiative that further empower women, especially in the economy and the politics of the country. So that is one area which I would name it as a non-traditional issue. The other area is of course the drug trafficking. The country, Taliban, they might also turn to drug sector at one point if they don't get, if they are unable to generate resources for the country, because to sustain their government, they already had kind of a mechanism in the past, so they might reach to the drug sector. The other and people, by the way, people also for the income to feed their families, especially in the remote areas, they might turn to the drug business. So that is another that will create and expand the drug trafficking in the region that is coming under non-traditional security issues for the country. And of course, issues such as I mentioned, such as the scarcity of resources, and if Taliban have lack capability, and that might impede the processes where people could contribute, earn, and generate resources from their own country. So, and that would cause more human insecurity, especially health insecurity and food insecurity. And these are all coming under the non-traditional security issues that the country has to face going forward. So these are all the overall pockets of traditional and non-traditional security issues that the Taliban takeover has caused. Some of them inherited from the past, of course, but most of them have fueled in the last 3 months. And if there won't be changes in the governance system, if there won't be changes in the attitude, behavior, and policies of the Taliban, if there won't be any proper economic plan in place from inside Afghanistan, I would assume that these challenges and issues will rise. They will not reduce, they will increase, and that might end up in creating a civil war inside the country, but the regional countries in the region and the neighboring countries will be also impacted by those changes. So the status of the regional countries with this particular pockets of insurgency, traditional and non-traditional security issues, I'll end that discussion. I would like a little bit focus, maybe for 5 minutes, on the regional countries, neighboring countries, the status and their reaction to this to the Taliban takeover and the current situation in Afghanistan. So overall, as I mentioned, these countries are concerned about their own security, and they have number of interests. The neighboring countries in Afghanistan, Iran in particular, Pakistan, China, they have both security and economic interest. There has been a large, there has been expanded trade between Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Afghanistan in the past. And then, of course, they want to have those trade with Afghanistan in future, because that would certainly add to their own economic growth. On the other hand, particularly Pakistan wants to have access to the Central Asian market, and Afghanistan is a good route, as an appropriate route to have that accessibility. So that the economic interests are there. On the other hand, China has interest in Afghanistan because China already had mega projects in Pakistan through SAPEC, through and of course BRI as well. And those projects are already running. They are in the running phase. They are operationalized in parts of Pakistan. And China does not want that any insurgency, any insecurity in Afghanistan would threaten those mega projects that China has. So China overall interest in Afghanistan is the security interest, because of its own economic expansion programs that it has in the region. Russia, on the other hand, has an interest of hegemon in the region. It wants to have a political influence and power influence in the region. And on the other hand, Russia is so much concerned about this Islamic radicalization that could cross its border from Afghanistan through the northern countries. So and the drug trafficking, another major concern of Russia. So Russia's interest evolves around all these areas, and it does want a stable Afghanistan in order to impede all those challenges that could pose to its own security going forward. India has a very tense relationship already with Pakistan, and knowing that Taliban are supported by the Pakistan, it's a matter of concern for India, because when Taliban have this stronghold, it means two rivals of India, such as Pakistan and China, they will have more presence in Afghanistan, and that would be and they could actually impact, or they could influence the security of the India if they want at some point. So therefore, India is concerned about the influence of Pakistan and China in Afghanistan because of its own security. So if you see, all these countries have really security concerns, and for all of them, it does make sense to come together and create a plan that could benefit them security-wise, and also they provide resources to Afghanistan to prevent Afghanistan from further collapse from a fueled civil war, and from all these issues, traditional and non-traditional security issues that I highlighted, that these countries could really do provide resources to prevent all these issues to arise. So, but overall, at this particular time, there hasn't been any statement of recognition from all these regional countries that I mentioned and highlighted. They have been supportive to Afghan people for the humanitarian to address the humanitarian crisis. They already, some of them, provided resources also, but and they are. Pakistan has a sympathy for the Taliban, and the other countries also, they are trying to work with the Taliban in order to seek security assurances, but that is difficult in the sense that nobody knows the Taliban yet at this point. Nobody knows the new 2.0 Taliban that they are calling it. They have to know them better. As I mentioned, Taliban, they did not cut ties with the transitional terrorist groups. It's premature at this stage to trust a militant group and shake hands with them for friendship and for further state-to-state relationship. Therefore, that's a challenging time, and this country seems they are in the wait-and-see position in order to cement their policy of engagement with Afghanistan going forward. But this is a confusing time at this point, as I mentioned, because of number of factors and because of lack of clarity about the nature of this new Taliban who are in power. I stop here, and if there's any questions or comments or further clarification, I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nilofar. This was very informative. We tired you a lot. I know it's exhausting, especially to speak on Zoom, so you don't know who is watching you, who's attending in fully or partially. So the floor is open. We have about 13 minutes left now because we have to end at 6:20. But until we have the first question, let me ask you something. This is, I guess, less about security, but it is about, because it's about Taliban. During the withdrawal, like I was surprised how much Taliban played a scenario from the book of the Western way of historically looking at Muslim terrorists, I'd say, right? Like specifically about women's rights, like women's position, like how much they have like paid lip service. It looks like it's not genuine to the fact that they are themselves this new Taliban. You know, like they didn't maybe phrase it like that, but they prepared all the conditions even before the full takeover for the outside world, not like kind of like de-weaponizing, disarming them towards like seeing them as these like evil savages who came, like will sack the city, for instance, entering Kabul and like chopping up people, which they didn't do. Or they announced that women will be allowed to go to, under Islamic law, whatever, they will be allowed to attend school. That's a different. So I wonder how you interpret that. Like what's going on there? What's their calculation? And do you think it worked or not?
Well, I followed very closely the peace process, so-called peace process that started in 2018. I think the peace process or withdrawal process, whatever we name it, that has changed. I mean, that has given a new face to the Taliban. And that the process tried, I think one of the indirect impact of the process was to transform Taliban from a militant group to a political group. And that has kind of changed them, not changed them. I don't believe they are changed, by the way. I believe that you clearly highlighted, Lerna, that's the lip service, yes. Because look, if they have changed, why they still have the same category of people in the interim setup? The same hardcores, the same no ethnic integration, no gender, balance of gender, nothing. So it seems they are just playing with the, currently at this particular time, with the international community, to be honest, in order to get recognition. Because if they have changed, for me as an analyst who just followed the peace process, who just followed them, I followed two things. I followed the statements of the Taliban spokesperson and Taliban representative in Doha. There were a number of events that they have been pushed to give a guideline or a strategy for economic development, for women's rights, for freedom of expression, for security. And they never provided any kind of strategy, guidelines, or plans. About women's rights, there were a lot of push during 2 years of the Doha process. That what do you think about women? How women will have access to different resources in the country, or will they be able to participate in all the sectors? So they had only one answer, by the way, Lerna, and the answer was, well, women's rights will be valued or respected according to Islamic values. That's it. So Islamic values, Islamic interpretation is different in different parts of the world by different groups, especially by a group like Taliban, who people have the history of their behavior with women's issue in the past. And they have never provided any kind of a solution or any kind of guideline. Just the answer was Islamic values. That's it. That was one. This is a fact that gave us that they haven't changed. The other fact for me is really the interim government that they put in place. That's another fact, the second fact. There are a number of other events, by the way, from last 3 months. For example, the attitude towards women journalists, the attitude towards women civil society actors or participants or practitioners, the attitude towards their statement about, they had a statement, by the way, about women in politics. They said that women are not eligible to be in politics. They clearly said that. I heard that a couple of times in the media by the Taliban, who said that, well, women are not, they don't have to be in politics. It's not their position, it's not their place. That's it. And they will, and they clearly said initially in September that, well, in our system, there won't be any women in politics. So look, I mean, how we see the change. You see you say that, okay, a group has changed, not only by what they say, but especially the political group, especially the political system, by the policies they put in place, by the strategies they put in place, by laws and bills that they pass. So whatever in written they have and whatever they practice so far, it doesn't demonstrate any change.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's not interesting. It's just sad, but also it's interesting that during these initial days of when they were capturing it, like for instance, they talked to women journalists like through interpreters, through walls and curtains. That they had the need to fulfill some kind of like anxiety, at least at the surface level, for the global community, and they use, you know.
And I don't know if you have followed this, that their attitude towards Western journalists, Western female journalists, is quite different than their attitude and behavior towards Afghan female journalists.
I did not follow it, but I can only imagine. Like I would have guessed that. That's yes. Exactly.
And that's again to show to the world that we are changed.
Yeah.
And they put a lot of pressure on the locals, on the citizens of Afghanistan, but they're kind of playing good game now, and good behavior they're showing to the Western development practitioners who are on the ground, Western journalists who are on the ground, just because they want to show that they have changed. But what we hear from the ground, what the stories are we are getting is the restrictions are still the same, and they have the same level of restrictions on the youth, not only women, by the way, the young men too, and the women as well.
And minorities probably.
And minorities, of course, I forgot. Yes, and on minorities as well. Yeah.
Great. Any questions from the audience? Oh, questions, sorry, I just saw this. My question, Jessica Jordan is asking, what can individuals in the United States and around the world do to best support the Afghan people, given the myriad challenges their society currently faces? And thank you. And this is, I'm sure you get this all the time. We all want to ask this. It will never get old, especially given that Americans are largely responsible for the current situation.
Well, yes, these questions have been always asked by media and by other organizations, and what to happen and what the international community, Americans, have to do in order to address some of the issues that I highlighted here and we see in media and everywhere. I think what I see, and looking at the nature of the Taliban government and their behavior and attitude, I think I wrote about this from a very theoretical perspective, but to put it in a practice, it's a people-centric policy of engagement. International community, individuals who can afford they should support the people's initiative. And there are people's initiative, by the way. There are humanitarian organization, community centers in the country. There are literacy, what they are calling centers. There are women organizations still active, by the way, inside the country. There are women businesses is still active. Some of them are in, not really publicly, they don't have their programs, but they are secretly they are performing their activities. So those kind of initiatives should be supported. It's challenging to transfer money at this point, but I think the situation will not remain the same. There will be sources to send money directly to those individuals, highlighting those individuals, organizations, community-based centers, and supporting them in order to build, first of all, build confidence. People have lost their confidence. They don't want to stay, there's a high level of fear and frustration in the country. Whoever is calling us, people like me, and whoever we call and talk to for friends and families, they just want to leave. They say this is not the same country anymore. We don't want to live here. We can't even tolerate these people going out, especially the progressive-minded people, especially the educated people. Maybe there is another kind of a support and sympathizing element for the Taliban as well, especially coming from rural population where they had their strongholds. I'm not saying that they don't have their support. They do have a support of the population, especially those who live in the rural areas and who where Taliban had their governance. But among the progressives, educated, class and level, you don't see anyone intend to stay in Afghanistan. They lost confidence, there's fear, there's frustration. First of all, they want to get out. And those who are remaining, they want to gain that agency of within themselves, to empower themselves to live. So I think having kind of a confidence in them, trying to support whatever activities they are initiating. There are a group of Afghan women from outside who want to create online education system for girls who are stopped from education, their online other kind of capacity building programs. So I think those small initiatives they do matter, and especially in the current context. And on the other hand, on the broader level, and the international community level, and their engagement with the Taliban going forward, I think recognizing them would be a mistake at this point. And engagement could be, yes, engagement, but diplomatic engagement, what kind of engagement? Because there's also a narrow line between engagement and recognition. So that should be really articulated well, and the support, whatever humanitarian support or development support is going to come up in future, that should be to the people of Afghanistan, people-centric engagement rather than state-centric engagement, because this group still have to prove themselves for that kind of engagement. It's very early to throw money in their system, and then you don't know how they will be using that money going forward.
Yeah, especially since they haven't proven themselves yet that they are different or anything. Okay, we need to stop here. Thank you so much, Nilofar. Again, this was very enlightening and informative, and unfortunately very timely, I would say. Thank you everyone for attending, and everyone for listening to this recording of this session in the future. Thank you for your interest. We will have other McMillan Stewart talks next year in the spring of 2022. With that, good night, everyone. Thank you, Nilofar.
Thank you, Rana, for having me. And thanks everyone for joining. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.